Hello, everyone. Welcome to the MMOA Podcast. My name is Kay Mayerdoma. I'm an outpatient physical therapist and a TA with the Modern Management of the Older Adult Division of ICE Physio. Before we begin, I just wanted to point you to some of our MMOA live courses we have coming up. This weekend, November 18th to 19th, we will be in Westmont, Illinois, and that is sold out. December 2nd to 3rd will be in Candler, North Carolina, and December 9th to 10th will be in Portland, Maine, which seems to have one spot left. So today we will be talking about bone health throughout the lifespan. Usually we talk about the older adult experience, but for bone health, talking about how we can impact it through a lifespan, and especially since everyone is an older adult in training, is really important. So we will be talking about how we as healthcare providers can impact people's bone health from the childhood years to our older adult years, which will be really important. Some of you guys listening out there may not be totally enthusiastic about treating older adults, which is okay, but it is definitely important for us to recognize what our role is to improve bone health throughout the lifespan, even if it's just in the back of our heads as we treat our younger athletes, our middle-aged patients, and so on. So for my PTs and OTs who love working with the younger athletes and the middle-aged folk, this one is also for you. So this weekend, a few coworkers and I put on an osteoporosis workshop, and I was looking for a good resource to give them and found this brochure called Serve Up Bone Strength Throughout the Life. It looks like this, and it had really good tips on what we can do for our younger population, our middle-aged population, and also our older adults. So that is what inspired me to do this topic today. And in my bone health bootcamp class, a wellness class I run within my clinic, a client was telling me today that when she was younger, women just didn't have the same opportunity for physical activity as men, which may or may not have impacted that population negatively now. So I really wanted to touch on this today as my topic. So we'll be going over what we can do for our children and adolescent patients, our adult patients, and our older adult / senior patients. So in an article by Wilson Barnes et al., I'll link it in the comments if you wanted to check it out. They stated that one of the key goals for children and adolescents is to achieve an optimal peak bone mass. Peak bone mass occurs in our childhood and peaks in our 20s. So in this article, they also noted that an increase in 10% of total bone mass during adolescence and early adulthood could potentially be half the risk of an osteoporotic fracture in later life. So what we do in our younger years can affect us later in life. Some issues we may see in our younger patient population, especially in females, is RED-S, so reduced energy deficiency in sport, which would negatively affect bone health. If you're interested in learning more about this, our pelvic division at ICE Physio has a bunch of content and podcasts on this if you wanted to check that out. In terms of physical activity, we know that some parents may be concerned that too much load in children because their bones are still developing could be an issue, but there have been studies noting that were noted in the study I mentioned above that higher impact physical activity showed improved bone mineral density compared to control groups and just compared to moderate exercise. The issue that this study stated that there was a review on randomized controlled trials that showed that exercise gains over a 6-month program at the femoral, neck, and lumbar spine range from 1 to 6% pre-puberty and 0.3 to 2% for adolescents. So the puberty status could be a limiting factor when advising physical activity for BMD. But I think some of these articles definitely are showing that high impact is okay for children because those are the years that bone mineral density can be positively affected, especially when we think about kids nowadays who are on their phones a lot, playing video games on the computer. Like they're probably not getting as much physical activity as they need to get to really positively impact their bone health. So we want to make sure that we're addressing this even with our younger patients. So for you guys who love treating the younger population, this is something we can consider for those patients who may not seem as active, and then just getting them possibly on the right track and getting them to adopt a healthier lifestyle for their future, pretty much. Number two, we need to educate our adult patients on how to maintain healthy bones and avoid premature bone loss. Because, again, just like with the children and the adolescent populations, it's proven that high impact and resistance training exercises are good for our bone health. So, with our our adult patients, we may see that they're really focused on career or dealing with just other life things like taking care of their children and taking care of their parents. So sometimes physical activity may not be at the front of their minds, but if they're coming into our clinic and we're noticing this pattern with them, or they tell us they just haven't been really active because they have other things, and you know that this could affect them in the future, that might be a conversation we have with that particular population. Because especially for women before menopause, like we can still make a huge impact on bone health for the adult patient. And so now, if we're talking about our senior years, our senior and older adult patients, we need to make sure we are continuing to have that conversation and helping them decrease that bone loss and make sure we educate them on things like balance, how to fall, and really just maintain their independence, because all of those things can affect their bone health. Because if they become less active, then they'll probably they'll be more sedentary, which we know that bone can go either way. If we start to load up our bone, our body can adapt to that and build up bones to be stronger. But also the other way is true, that if we don't do anything and we're sedentary, then our bones are like, well, we don't really need that. And it'll adapt the other way and the bones will be more fragile. So we know from studies like the Lift More trial that participating in a high intensity resistance and impact training program can have a positive effect on postmenopausal women with osteoporosis, osteopenia, but they have also done this trial with men, which showed the same thing, that if you give patients a supervised exercise program with higher loads and some impact, like a jumping pull-up, then that actually isn't going to harm them. Like they didn't find any fractures in that study in the experimental group, and the people compared to the control group who did more of like a home exercise program at a lower intensity. So there, at every stage of life, there is a way for us to really positively impact bone health, which I think is really cool. Sometimes it's not something we may consider when we're working with our younger patients because we're trying to keep them active in their sport, but it could just be a back of your mind thing where you're like, okay, well, if I can keep this patient active and doing their sport or running or lifting, then that's probably going to impact them positively for the future in terms of their bone health, especially when we know that peak bone health or peak bone mass is in our younger years, in our 20s. So, to wrap things up, there are definitely things that we can do for every stage of life to either improve bone mass, maintain bone mass, or even to help decrease bone mass and decrease fall risk, which could lead to fractures. We know that there are a lot of non modifiable risk factors for bone health, but more importantly, we need to continue to recognize and help our patients realize that there are a lot of modifiable risk factors that we can continue to influence throughout the lifespan, including that piece of physical activity, our diet. Like, are we getting enough calcium and vitamin D? And decreasing lifestyle behaviors that could negatively impact bone health as well, such as smoking and excessive alcohol intake. It's really up to us to recognize our role in our patients' care and really consider the positive effect we might have on their lifespan bone health. Because what we work on or do when we work with a 16-year-old athlete can possibly affect what their bone mass looks like when they're 85 years old. Um, Lastly, if there's a resource that you wanted to give to a patient so that they know how much calcium they need, how much vitamin D, what kinds of exercises, and all of that, this um, this little brochure pamphlet from the International Osteoporosis Foundation is a great resource, and it spells things out really easily and nicely. Because it's made for patients and not any like crazy medical jargon. So I will link both this and the article I talked about in the comments section. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.